Hey folks, James here. This week's episode of the McKinney Podcast is a special one-on-one conversation with Mayor Bill Cox. I get to ask him 7 questions about what we can expect from him during his first term as mayor, his vision, his ideas, the things that he plans to do, and the challenges that he foresees facing, etc. This special lounge session happened about a week ago, and I'm very grateful to AJ Micheletto and Bill and his team for making time for us. He's been in office about a month as we record this, and I know that many of you are interested in hearing what you can expect from Mayor Bill Cox. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this lounge session with Mayor Bill Cox on the McKinney Podcast. All right, folks, this is a special conversation. It's been a long time coming. A few weeks ago, when it looked very clear, and then obviously the official results became what they are, that Bill Cox was going to be our next mayor, the night that he won, I said, let's let the dust settle for a few weeks, and then why don't you come to the studio and have a conversation with me about what the next 4 years are going to look like. And what do you know? He said, that sounds like fun. Let's do it. And here we are today. I'd love for you to welcome Mayor Bill Cox. Man, it sounds good to say that, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Thanks for coming out, man.
Thank you,
I know
James.
you've got a lot on your plate. There's a lot that you are now responsible for, not just as a husband and as a dad, but the leader of a company and now the mayor of the city of McKinney.
Right.
So thank you for being here. I have some questions that we're going to get into just to give the people of McKinney and our neighbors in other parts of Collin County and perhaps greater DFW some insight on you as a man, you as a leader, and kind of what to expect for the next 4 years here in McKinney with Bill Cox as mayor. Dare I say perhaps 8 years if things go well in the first 4. So I'm just going to jump right into it, man. We're going to skip the introductory stuff. At this point, if people are watching this video, they probably have some kind of idea of who you are and backstory and whatnot. There's plenty of other content out there on the internet. If people want to get the where'd you come from, where'd you grow up, all that stuff. 3rd generation McKinney, all of that. So I'm just going to go straight to the questions, and wherever the conversation goes is where it goes. So the first question here: what lessons did you learn in the campaign and in election season that you feel will help you more effectively engage with the people of McKinney?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we learned is that there are people in McKinney that truly care. They truly care about McKinney and sincerely want it to be a better place. And then there are other people. So what we learned, those that truly want to make a difference are involved. We have already had communication with a number of those people that we met in the campaign. It's one thing to say you're a 3rd generation, lifelong, and that's great. But you know what? Everyone is not in that situation. So we've learned how to talk with people that aren't from here, which is the majority of McKinney. And it's really important to hear their concerns and their thoughts and their views on what McKinney can do to be better. And we've engaged some of those people. So yeah, we learned in the campaign that there are people out there that truly want McKinney to be the best it can be.
I totally agree. There's a very small percentage of folks that are antagonist by nature. And I'm not going to talk to those folks at all. I don't have any message for them. Lots has been said about them. Follow-up question to what we just talked about. What's your message for folks that maybe didn't vote for you in the election, that they supported your candidate, Scott Sanford, who is a genuine and kind, decent man, and a lot of people wanted him to be mayor? What's your message to the folks that maybe weren't on board with the Bill Cox campaign, but now you're their mayor too? People that voted for Scott, you're still their mayor. How do you bring other people into the fold and invite them to the conversation and keep other people from feeling perhaps disenfranchised because they weren't supporting you in the campaign, but now you're their mayor because you're the mayor of all people in McKinney? What's your message for them?
Right, and that's a good point. One of the things we talked about early in the campaign is that there's a place for everyone in McKinney. There's a place if you want to be involved, And connecting with your comment about the election, if regardless of who you supported or didn't support, leadership is in place.
Yep.
And if you truly want to make a difference, you'll engage. You'll be engaged in the leadership. And if you choose otherwise, then that's on you. But there is a place for everyone. Campaign season is over.
Yeah.
Now it's time to get to work. Now it's time to focus on what makes McKinney be as good as McKinney can be.
Totally agree. 100%. Second question, what is your vision for your first term as mayor? And are there specific projects or goals that you plan to pursue in your first 4 years?
You know, the main focus is the quality of life for the people that live in McKinney. That's job one. How do we continue to make people be proud to be from McKinney and make people continue to move their families and businesses to McKinney? And it comes down to the quality of life. So what can we as a city do to make that experience be as good as it can be? That's the main thing that we focus on. How do you do that? You attract businesses that pay good wages. You have housing opportunities for different types of families. Families don't all look the same. Families look differently than each other. So we have to provide those opportunities. Opportunities for entertainment, opportunities for open space, parks. All of those things are the main focus that we'll have in this with this council.
When you look at our city as it compares to our peer group in DFW, namely Frisco, of course, because they're our next door neighbor right down the street. Allen to a lesser extent, because I feel Allen is a much smaller land-wise. They're really just kind of clustered around that 75 corridor. How do you as mayor plan to use the systemic advantages that we have in McKinney to successfully compete with our peer group for those businesses, the successful families, the up-and-coming founders and entrepreneurs that haven't even become business owners yet, that are going to start a business in McKinney? How do you attract those folks to McKinney instead of to Frisco or to Salina or somewhere else in our peer group nearby?
Yeah, great question. So the region, the DFW regions, and specifically North Texas, has been recognized over the last number of years as the biggest and the best and the safest, and all of these accolades. And McKinney has received, our fair share specifically in that type recognition. So it's important that we compete. We compete with our neighboring cities, and we compete for businesses. We compete for the best employers. We compete for the best companies, the best teachers. And in order to do that, we as a city have to stay focused. And we have to stay focused with our economic development, with our community development, and with how we plan the city. What do we look like in 10, 20 years? We're making decisions today that affect people that don't even live here. We're making decisions today for people that we don't even know. They're not our neighbors and our friends. So it's important that we have that forward-thinking vision where we are aware of what the needs are. And as a council, and we have a great council right now.
Just an outstanding council.
A really good council. Everyone is engaged and plugged in and really wants McKinney to be as good as it can be. So it's important, that we offer opportunities for these families and businesses to locate in McKinney.
Love it. The challenges of infrastructure have been talked about at length. I think it's a lot of people's concern. And forgive me, this wasn't specifically in the list of questions, but sure. I think it bears asking. As we're sitting here just off of El Dorado, where they have started another construction project to revitalize the road surface here from here to Ridge, and then in Virginia as well over the next 18 months. Mm-hmm. How do you as mayor plan to continue the vibrant support of infrastructure projects, whether it's traffic or access to water or the other things that, as McKinney continues to grow, like these are systemic things that are going to be a huge concern, so that we are not behind the curve on just the basic resources needed to run a city. How do you as mayor support infrastructure growth without, getting over our skis too much or harming, as you said, the quality of life of McKinney citizens?
Yeah, it's important that we as a city commit the resources to make these repairs and these improvements in our infrastructure. McKinney is there are some areas of town that are very historic, and then there are some areas in town that are brand new, and it's easier to develop with a blank slate. It's easier to develop an open field versus an area in town that is already fully developed.
Yep.
And you have aging water lines and sewer lines and gas lines and no sidewalks. So it's important that we focus on those areas and not spend all of our resources in the new areas. We've got to acknowledge we have parts of town that have needs.
Yeah.
And whether that be, call it east of 75, whatever line you draw, in your conclusion, but there are areas in town that need the basic infrastructure, and we need to continue to commit those funds and make that a priority.
I'm really encouraged to hear you say that, and I think that's a great answer to the question. One of the very common things that I heard from folks during the campaign season is that a lot of the people in certain parts of the city feel overlooked, and all of these big, exciting, very cool development things that are happening of people looking at the next 100,000 people that move to McKinney and maybe tempted to say, well, what about me? I already live here. What about my quality of life? And that answer is spot on, man. I love that. Moving on here, this was a big point of contention during the campaign. You've spent your career in the commercial real estate world as an agent, as a broker. How do you see these experiences and insights will serve you well as mayor?
Yeah, it's important as a real estate professional. You learn how to build relationships. You learn how to create trust. And building relationships and creating trust are two key features, two key skills, if you will, that it takes to be an effective mayor, be an effective elected official. And by listening to your citizens, understand their concerns, that and having those relationship skills, problem solving skills will help not only me as mayor but also the council as well.
I'd love for you to talk for just a second about the difference between a real estate broker and a real estate developer. Because one of the most common attacks during the campaign was the unfounded allegations that you as mayor would somehow be impaired in your judgment and your decision making because you would have a personal financial interest in seeing certain development projects happen. And I'm sitting back here knowing the real estate world pretty well because I'm in the commercial insurance world for our business. Right. I'm sitting here going, folks, I think you're getting a little confused on the difference between a developer and an agent and broker, because those two things can be very different. Just explain the differences for those that may be not familiar, and talk about how you as mayor, one, you're lawfully prohibited from doing things that could have a either indirect or direct conflict of interest that would benefit you personally, financially, as mayor. Like, you lawfully can't do that without probably going to jail. And just talk about the difference between a broker and a developer, because the implications for you as mayor are huge, and the difference between an agent, a broker, and a developer, someone who's dreaming up new projects and trying to convince people to make them happen.
Yeah, first of all, that's illegal. You can't do that.
What a concept, right?
Yeah, that's you're right. It's been talked about over the last several months. So let's repeat the story.
Yeah.
My profession is as a real estate broker and co-owner in a company that represents buyers and sellers and what's best for their assets. We also run a property management company, which we manage property. We collect rents, pay bills, and then pay the owner out of the proceeds.
You can't travel anywhere in this city without seeing a Kerry Cox sign. Like, every square, every corner of this city is represented by the properties that you own and manage through your Kerry Cox company. You want to talk about underrepresentation? Everyone in McKinney has a chance to be represented by Kerry Cox, but that is not a development company. And there's just a huge difference there. I don't think a lot of people really grasped during the campaign.
Yeah, we're as a company, we're not buying land and building buildings and then selling the asset. We're not in that development business. We're just simply brokers.
Yeah. As a citizen, I think it's a positive. It's not a negative. It's not a conflict of interest. What do you know? Do you think it might be important for our mayor to have knowledge of the way that deals come together in the commercial real estate world? We just came out of 8 years with George Fuller. George is a developer. George was instrumental in several things happening, but not to his personal gain. And as you'll find out in the next 4 years, George undoubtedly lost multiple six figures of personal revenue just from opportunity cost of things that he wasn't able to do because he was mayor, and he wasn't able to meddle in certain things as a private citizen, as a business owner, because he was mayor of our city. And wow, you look at some of the things that have come about in the last 8 years, having someone that understands the commercial real estate world just might be a very big asset for our city.
It would be a huge asset. Yeah, a huge asset.
Love it. All right, so next question here. What advantages do you see specifically from McKinney as we look to attract the best and brightest families and businesses to move to our city? Feel free to dig deep in that if you want to, or stay high level, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, when companies and families consider moving to McKinney, the first thing they ask is, tell us about the educational system, tell us about the school system, and all that is.
Yep.
We have many different forms and types of education in McKinney, and they all are important. That those prospective families and companies ask the question, what's it like? The next thing they ask is, tell us about your historic downtown. We've been there and we loved it. Is there a commitment from the city to maintain it? And the answer is absolutely yes, 100%.
Yep.
And then as corporations consider moving here, the airport.
Yep.
The airport, TKI is at top of the list. Those are the top three things that people ask. They don't ask where the golf course is. They don't ask where pickleball courts are. They ask about schools, your downtown area, and the airport. And it's important that those areas, those relationships, and those resources are continued by the city.
Fred and I on the McKinney Podcast have had Ken Ussery and Corey Homer on, two new members of the school board.
Right.
There's a lot of collaboration between council and school board, between Sean Pratt, superintendent, and other administrators. How do you see, as mayor, your collaboration with those other elected officials, with Sean Pratt as superintendent? What are some things that you're looking forward to as far as the interplay between council and the school board?
Yeah, it's important that the school district, the superintendent, and then the school board have a good relationship with the elected city officials. Again, going back to education in McKinney, and as we continue to grow, and as you know, we will continue to grow. So It's important that if you need to pick up the phone and call the superintendent or the school board president, you have a good relationship with those people. And that's very important, very important.
Now, as far as the airport goes, obviously there's pending legal activity, so I'm not going to ask you to ask a question that the general counsel said, let's not talk about that. What is your take on the future of the airport? What does it need to look like in the next 4 years? And this is just Bill Cox's opinion as a person, but also in your official capacity as mayor. Like, when you leave office, what do you want the airport to be at the time that you leave?
Previous councils have made the commitment to grow the airport and to expand with commercial service and build a commercial terminal. And that is going to happen. That is an asset the city owns. And that's, as a new council, we need to make that asset be as good as it can be. You ask personally. Personally, I support the airport. I think it's an asset that McKinney and the region needs. I think it helps us attract businesses. It helps us attract families to McKinney. that have a need for an airport.
Yeah.
I'm a believer.
Now, I'm not going to give you any argument there, man. When you look at our peer group cities, Frisco doesn't have an airport.
Right.
Prosper and Salina don't have an airport. Allen doesn't have an airport. Plano doesn't have an airport. We have two. Aero Country is great for the training and the general aviation, but man, TKI, when I think about what it can be a decade or two from now, when my kids are hopefully still living in the McKinney area, ooh, man, that's exciting stuff right there.
And it's regional. While the airport is in McKinney, and the funding is partially from McKinney, it's a regional asset.
It really is.
And receiving the commitment of real dollars from the state in the last budget, which had the support of our elected officials in Austin, says a lot about who really supports that airport.
It was $18 million, right?
Right.
Wow. That is
14.
14
and change. Yeah.
$14 million is a big commitment from the state. And that's in addition to federal grants and allocated assets from EDC and from CDC. There's a lot of different ways to get something done.
Right.
And do you want to talk a little bit about respecting the will of the voters as far as the contention about the bond and everything like that, or has that been talked to death at this point?
Well, two things. It has been talked to death, but of course the 2023 bond election that failed needs to be acknowledged. It needs to be acknowledged that the citizens said no to a $200 million bond package to expand the airport. That was a 16-gate terminal, and that got turned down. So the previous council went back, scaled down the model, if you will, and created a four-gate terminal at a third of the cost. So yes, in fact, the citizens said no to that bond package.
I have a feeling that once the airport is operational and once it has a year or two of being there, the good people of McKinney might feel a little differently than they did the last time. Because obviously, you can't have much of an airport with 4 gates. At some point, you're going to need to expand beyond 4, whether it's 8 or 10 or 14 or even 16. I don't know if we'll ever get to be 20 gates like Love Field is, but what do you think is the best fit as far as McKinney's needs in the future? Obviously, you're mayor for 4, potentially 8 years. We don't know what the future holds. What do you think the sweet spot is in the future, whether it's a decade from now, 15, 20 years from now? In your opinion, what does TKI look like in its best sense?
TKI, in my opinion, take the mayor's hat off.
Sure. This is just Bill, the citizen, talking.
I don't see that being a 12 or a 16-gate terminal. I don't see that.
Okay.
Some things would need to change site plan-wise and geographically. You've got some topography out there in that area that just doesn't lend itself to airplanes moving in and about. I can see 4 to 6 gates, possibly a few more, but the immediate in the short term, it's 4 to 6 gates. And I do think that once the terminal is open and we see some success, we'll have other airlines come in and say, hey, we've got a need.
Yep.
We can benefit, which in turn would benefit the city.
Okay. So next question here. You've been in office just a few weeks. You're still, putting files in cabinets and putting things on shelves and whatnot. But now that you've had a little bit of time to get acquainted as mayor, what specific challenges have you identified that you plan to attack head on?
One of the main challenges that we have as a city and as elected officials is the growth that is coming to McKinney. As we've talked about, McKinney is going to continue to grow. We can't close the gate. That's not possible. So how do we as a city plan and deal with that extended growth, specifically in those ETJ areas that we really don't have any control over? And state law continues to change and put more burdens on our zoning and our long-range plans and our infrastructure. So our challenge is going to be how do we deal with the legislation that's come down that affects us, and how does that look as McKinney continues to move forward? How do we look in the next 1 to 5 years, 1 to 10 years. What does that plan look like? How often or how frequently do we need to go back to that future land use map and make alterations and make changes to it based on changes in the state law that drastically affect what we look like as a city?
During the campaign, the topic of apartments and housing in general was definitely one of the most vocal issues that came up time and time again,
Right.
In debates, on social media, and face-to-face conversations. In light of the recent legislative change where the state of Texas, for some reason that escapes my comprehension, decided to take control away from local governance on the way that certain multifamily assets are able to be built. I know your perspective on apartments in general. I'm not going to ask you a generalized question. For those that may not be familiar, Bill, as the chair of Planning and Zoning Commission, was involved in restructuring a lot of the zoning requirements across our city to prevent more than 4,000 apartment units from being built in certain parts of the city where P&Z felt like the density was already at an appropriate level. I don't know if you were aware of that or not, but that's part of this man's history. So I'm not going to ask you some of those questions. Those have already been discussed at length. As mayor, how do you plan to navigate some of these new challenges that are brought on by a state legislature that appears like, this is just my opinion, they appear to be trying to wrestle more control away from local municipal governance and redistribute that to the state level, which I find highly problematic. But nevertheless, that's the reality that you have to exist in as mayor. How do you go about providing leadership to P&Z, to developers, to folks who may want to build apartments in places where you and council and people here in McKinney may think it's not the best idea?
Yeah, so you're specifically talking about Senate Bill 840, which was passed and signed, approved by this last legislature and Governor Abbott. And the challenge is it allows multifamily to be built in existing buildings that don't have multifamily zoning as an allowed use. What does that look like in McKinney? We don't know yet. As a staff, our city staff is going through and comparing what the letter of the law says to how does it affect current facilities in McKinney. There are some height restrictions and some things that we are concerned about. So what does it look like? We don't know yet.
Man.
What we do know is it allows multifamily development in areas that the city previously did not have those allowed uses, which affects utilities, perhaps parking, impact on roads. So it's a big unknown right now.
And I would imagine City Manager Paul Grimes and his leadership in the streets and the public works and utilities side of things is just taking a very close look at that, because when you talk about gas and sewer and water and appropriate roads, like when you build an apartment complex, all of those things are suddenly different. The calculations, the flow rates, the needs of just basic daily showering and bathing and cooking and whatnot, all of those things get changed. And guess what? The pipes that are already in the ground that have been there for 30 years don't magically change if you put an apartment complex somewhere. Those are going to be huge challenges for folks to figure out in the next year or two, right?
Right.
Am I missing anything there?
No, I think the legislature, I think they truly are trying to address a way to get people into homes where they don't cost as much money.
Yeah.
And that's not a McKinney-specific or a Texas-specific problem. With what it costs to buy land and build and finance and interest rates and all of those things, it's really expensive for a lot of families to make the ends meet. So I do think the legislature, they were sincere in trying to come up with ways to ease that burden. But what Senate Bill 840, how it affects McKinney, which is our main focus, period.
Yep.
That's our main focus is how does it affect McKinney? It appears to be a very negative thing.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, unfortunately. As we record this, this happened just a week ago, the recent flooding tragedy in Kerrville exposed the dangers of not keeping strong collaboration with state and federal resources. As mayor, how do you plan to develop and maintain the relationships outside of our city that will help you represent our interests well, both regionally and statewide?
You know, what's happened in Kerr County is tragic, and we all, our hearts go out to those families affected by the flooding in Kerr County. But yes, it's important to maintain relationships with your legislative body in Austin, and also your elected officials in Washington. Heaven forbid something like Kerr County event doesn't happen here, but you need to be able to have relationships with your elected officials just to keep that line of communication open. We're very fortunate. I've got the cell phones of our elected officials, so the relationship is there. Yeah, but that's a very important point. We need to maintain those relationships.
How do you feel about emergency preparedness, disaster resources, and planning at the city level? It probably hasn't come up yet. You've been in office, not even officially a month yet. What's your gut level instinct on our level of preparation as a city should something horrible happen?
Yeah, you're right. I think I've been mayor 4 weeks, three and a half weeks. So it's been sunny and 85.
Yep.
Fortunately, we do have the emergencies notification system that goes off once a month that we all hear.
Saturday at 12 o'clock.
Saturday at 12 o'clock, which is a good thing.
Yep.
But yeah, it's important that we maintain communication with our citizens in the event of a situation where it's weather related or what have you. We need to be able to reach our citizens in whatever form or fashion technology allows us to reach our citizens. But yeah, it's important that we maintain those systems for sure.
Last question. We're almost to the end here. McKinney has seen numerous major announcements in the last year or so. The Sunset Amphitheater, the Cannon Beach Water Park down by 121, the West Grove development, where Whole Foods and a bunch of other stores are coming in, the recent announcement of the JW Marriott happening in Craig Ranch. Wow, finally, at long last, it's been rumored for years and years and years there. What announcements most excite you personally, for you and your family and friends and whatnot? And what do you think McKinney needs next? What's the next big announcement that you'd love to see made? Is there anything you feel like is missing, maybe categorically or something specific that you'd love to see our partners at EDC be able to attract to our city?
And the list of new businesses and new opportunities that you read off are opportunities for our citizens to expand that quality of life, to experience things, and to have entertainment venues and business venues and places to go as a family. And also, those venues will attract new companies to McKinney. It will help us keep events like the CJ Cup Byron Nelson. You have a 5-star luxury hotel in McKinney, the only one in Collin County. That's a big deal, and that will help attract, again, companies to McKinney and visitors to McKinney. And when visitors come to McKinney, they spend money in McKinney, and we collect those sales tax dollars. One of the biggest announcements is TKI, the airport. Yep. Again, it's been talked about for years and years, and it's a reality now. The terminal is going to be built, and it again will attract. It gives us a distinct advantage in recruiting companies to McKinney. So I think that's economically that's going to be the biggest driver that we've had out of the list you read.
I think most people don't realize when you look at the overall map of McKinney between annexed land already and the ETJ especially, when McKinney is fully built out another 20 or 30 years from now, 380 is kind of the belt line that goes through the middle of our town. It seems sometimes, a few years ago when I first, had a business here in McKinney, 380 felt like Oklahoma practically. But so much land is yet to be determined north of 380. We have thousands and thousands of acres that are still naked and waiting for dreams to be enacted on them.
Right.
I'm really curious to see what the city looks like 20 years from now, because the 121 corridor and 75 corridor, obviously those are very well built out, but you look up Custer and Lake Forest and Hardin and these other arteries that there's just a bunch of grass sitting there. What do you look forward to seeing? Like, what do you want to see in these big patches of wide open space? Is there anything you want to dream out loud on? Of it sure would be nice if we could have blank.
If we could have the state law change that prohibited the city from being in the discussion of development in the ETJ, that would be wish number one.
Yep.
There was a time in the not so distant past that the geographic center of McKinney was 380 and 75. And now with changes in state law that prevent annexation and prevent the city from having any meaningful dialogue with developers, that may change. That build out that we projected of 400,000 people may come down. It may not be that much. And at the same time, if state law is not changed, we will have upwards of 400,000 people that have access to our roads, our parks, and everything that McKinney citizens pay for. And those citizens in that ETJ area will not be paying property taxes, which go in turn to police, fire, city parks, city streets, so on and so forth. So wish number one would be a change in state law.
Curveball here, based on what you just said. I know we didn't talk about ESD at all, emergency services districts. Those folks that live in the ETJ that don't pay city taxes, that don't contribute in the same way that the citizens of actual city of McKinney lands do. How in the world do you as mayor best balance fairness and basic services that are provided by a so-called emergency services district? Obviously, there's some sort of collaboration with the county because those are county lands, their jurisdiction under the county commissioner's court rather than any municipality. But as a citizen of McKinney, I don't necessarily want my city's resources going to people that don't live in the city of McKinney, that don't contribute to taxes in the same way. How do you balance fairness with being a good steward of the city's resources?
Yeah, it's important to have, and these ESDs that you're talking about are when someone has a need for police or fire, and they call 911, and ambulances and fire trucks and police cars show up. Someone pays for that, and we have a good working relationship with the county, and we are continuing to work with County Judge Hill and the court to work through how do we answer these questions, how does it look going forward. Again, back to the change in state law that forced the question regarding who pays for emergency services areas in Texas of areas that are not in city limits. But yeah, we're working through that with the Commissioner's Court and the County Judge now.
There's a lot of stakeholders in that question.
Yeah.
And people get real loud when you start talking about taking away police and fire. It's like, well, maybe you should vote for annexation then, become a part of the city and won't have a problem with it because now you're part of McKinney. Now you're paying taxes. Now you get full access, including, trash. What a concept. A trash truck coming down your street and taking your garbage away. Yeah. Man, is there anything else that we've missed? You have an open invitation to talk to the audience here. Is there anything that you want to say, any announcements, any call to action that you want to make as mayor?
The one thing I would like to mention is our city staff.
Yep.
And since being elected and then sworn in, the amount of time I have spent with city staff, the professionalism that they have, and the level of commitment to making McKinney better that our city staff has is really heartwarming to see, and it's really special to see these professionals, and that's what they are, professionals.
Yep.
Continue to work on their craft and continue to make McKinney shine as bright as it can shine.
Love it. It starts at the top with City Manager Paul Grimes and City Secretary Empress Drain, all the way down to the folks that clean the streets and pick up trash in the parks and whatnot. Roughly 1,800 city staff that make McKinney what it is. I definitely share your sentiments there. He's Mayor Bill Cox, and his contact information, if you want to reach him in his official capacity as mayor, we'll make sure that's in the description of this video. Bill, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Take care, folks, and you can catch the next episode of the McKinney Podcast that drops this coming Monday. Y'all take care.